Hello, welcome, good afternoon. This is take one of a attempt at speaking about layers of analysis. So, I don't know the first time I heard that phrase. It seems like it's been within the last few years, but it's begun to mean a lot to me as a way of thinking about the way that, well, as we put it in a conversation, me and some friends recently, well, relatively recently, any model you create, as Heidegger would put it, will obscure some aspect of reality, make it harder to see. And so if you think of a model as something like a crystal, you could make, hopefully, many models layered together so that you can kind of spin it, and whatever is obscured in one point becomes clarified as you move the model. That way it's not just a flat thing that is in its nature going to obscure something, but is something that you can continuously change perspective on and move and shift and turn so that you hit all the layers of analysis needed to get an accurate image in your head of what is happening. And there are, of course, you'd speak of Vervaeke's 4 types of knowing as aspects of, or as a kind of layer, or as a kind of an analytical tool, a way of looking at, do you have all the types of knowledge concurrent with a situation? I think the term systems is a tool of analysis. I suppose once you've got that, though, you're looking at that crystalline perspective, because systems is a way, once you have a good definition for the idea of systems, then you begin to realize everything is a system, and nothing is flat and virtual and simple and linear. Nothing truly is. You can make linear proposals and linear models, but they will fail you. Whereas if you take the time to build a sufficiently complicated systemic model, then you will be able to adapt that system to different situations so that no matter how complicated things get, you have a good and accurate idea of what's happening. And I would say something also, just because it jumps to mind, that is what the universities need to do with their divided nature. The divided nature of, instead of there being a universal model the universities use and simply look at it from different lenses, you have those tool sets isolated from each other, and no unifying language connects them. Okay, so what are some other layers? One layer I would speak of is the analytical and the analogical, I call them, which is basically a slight reformulation and with other aspects added to Ian McGilchrist's idea of the master and its emissary. I don't object to, but I do not consume or absorb all of McGilchrist's work, simply because I am uncertain of it all. I think he will be justified in the long run as to most of his ideas, although I think the model will have to be far more complicated. And I might have already done a video about that. So I'll move on. What I want to say, rather, is that... Oh, excuse me, sorry. Well, analytical and analogical are intended as an embodiment of his idea without the corresponding neuroscience necessarily included. Because I'm not sure of the neuroscience, and I don't think we have a sufficiently complicated model to truly warrant McGilchrist's model. although I think it can be turned into a more complicated model as we get more detail and ideas. But anyway, I already said that. So what I'm trying to say, rather than that again and again, is that, so it's a model without the neuroscience. So simply recognizing that he has built a set of stories about what I will call the grasping hand and the open hand. Or another way of looking at it is the analytical, which is to analyze, to divide, right? Analyze, if I remember right, is something like to divide, or shoot, I don't remember what it is now, but it is something like to not remain solid, something like that, I think is what it is. So it is divide, divide, divide. That is to analyze. And then an analog is to not, well, unfortunately it comes down to something like is not of the word. But what that means is the word is kind of that which we divide things into, right? When we analyze, we divide things into more and more granular words. And when we analogize, or speak of the analogical, and you could also speak of something that is analogous, right? All of those are statements about, or I'm trying to use those to refer to this interesting idea of imagistic patterns and of the pattern of patterns. And I think this is what happens with our pattern recognition software. When it is not dividing, it is accumulating. And when it accumulates, that is a very different process than if you have a bunch of parts and divided parts and you try to connect them together in an analogical fashion, in this linear fashion, I don't think you truly evolve what is needed, what is necessary, what is desired. I think something else evolves. Something like, a virtual reality simulation, but not a very good one usually, unless you're really good at reassembling all the divided parts of the world. And I don't think we're very good at it because we don't know what we've left out of our analysis. We don't always recognize what we've left out. So the analogical then is this tool that is necessary for understanding most of science, whether science wants to acknowledge that or not. The atom, the models we have of an atom are an analogy of what the math is, that we, what the measurements and what the math are. They are not an atom. The atom is merely a model of the data we have, right? It's an analogy for the data. And then there's the metaphorical, which is also wrapped up, or I'm attempting to wrap up in this. And metaphor is something like a pattern of patterns, or at least archetypical metaphors are. These archetypical stories and archetypical symbols are, okay, I've dealt with all this and it's not furthering the cause. But that's the analytical and analogical, and those are another set of analytical, of layers to be analyzed. And then another one I would add, I guess I'll add briefly, is the lexicon. But this is a specific type of lexicon I'm working on a formulation for, which seeks to be term and definition, but not in alphabetical order. Rather, by grouping terms by systemic set, and by creating terms that begin as something like high-level generalizations, but which then begin to accumulate into more practical models. into story, let's say, into something like a metaphorical narrative or a descriptive narrative, either one. But then these tools begin to divide out in a different way when you get to the practical, as you will be defining house and car and screwdriver instead of defining tool use or shelter or travel. Those are abstractions that we use in general ways for our practical uses. Our solid, the car is a solid thing that I use for a very abstract purpose, travel. It is a multiple use tool because I can use it to travel in many different directions, right? It's not just a train going back and forth. Okay, that's a fairly decent introduction to the lexicon. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much.